Good afternoon, everybody from Spain. Welcome to you all, wherever you might be in the world, though I know most of you are in the US. It's a much warmer Spain today, so I'm gradually beginning to take the layers off. And I'm joining you to a certain extent of the night after experience of having watched my football club. I know some of you call it soccer, but I'm going to stick to football, win their first trophy in 17 years. And the name of that club is Tottenham Hotspur, so shout out to them. And one of the interesting things about that is the player who has made the most appearances for the club, I believe it's something like 853, which will show you that I'm a fan going back some decades, and very decorated, actually had an aortic dissection. So there we have an elite sportsman. He was coaching at the time. I know that. We often call it manager. But there you go. Interesting that, aortic dissections seem to be no respecter of class, money, what you do for a living. It's a very varied universe. So just to say once again, many of you may know by now, my name is John Quick. I'm also an aortic dissection survivor, having had, out of the blue, a type A dissection, which required emergency open heart surgery, had a titanium aortic valve fitted, and then a prosthesis from the aortic root. And then a few weeks later, I had a type B dissection, which I've now been managing defensively. As many of you will know, that's what you do. And with scans for 18 years. And so far in these last years, everything has been very stable. And I know for many of you, that's interesting in terms of not all of you are 18 years. Some of you are at 2, 3, 4, 5. And hopefully that's something I can bring to the experience, is kind of, a bit of experience. It is a bit like, in some ways, being a senior player in the team, having put in more experiences and more appearances, or days as we might call it. Now, before I forget, I must also ask you, on behalf of everybody here, to like and share the site, the program, to encourage traction and spread. And just to add to my experience, that also caused me to change direction in life. And I began to study in mental health areas, psychology, and have gradually graduated into that profession, gaining qualifications and beginning to help people myself. And a lot of the work I do is actually with trauma survivors. So without further ado, I'm aware that in the US, this month is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I thought that's a topic I would kind of hone in on and take a particular area of it, which I thought might be relevant for us, and kind of specifically relevant, and kind of and what can be a kind of some tools that we can take away from what I'm going to talk about. So, let's just cover some basic things. I mean, it may seem like a very obvious thing to say, but we all have a degree of mental health, as we have a degree of physical health, and it can go up and down. It's never necessarily going to go the same. It's going to be affected by many things in life, ranging from family experiences to diet, to fitness, to experiences out there in the world, to relationships, to upbringing. It's multiple. And I was looking at some data on this. And in the US, 1 in 5 adults will experience a mental illness at some period in their life. Specific reasons for that aren't particularly for now, but anxiety disorders top the list of being the most common in mental health. So I thought we'd look at, what's specific to mental health about being an aortic dissection survivor, sufferer, whatever we want to call it. And I was thinking about the word uncertainty. And generally speaking, you know, I'm hearing a lot at the moment from people that there's a lot of uncertainty in the world, and perhaps more uncertainty than many of us have ever experienced in our lifetimes. And of course, it's perfectly normal that that causes people to feel unsettled. That in itself causes anxiety. So then the question I was thinking about was, if we were to accept that uncertainty, just accept it, you know, what, and you were, and I was, what would I do? What would you do? What might you change? And so let's just think about that. You know, we accept the uncertainty of life to a greater extent, but in so doing, what do we then change? And would it be things like not sweating the small stuff? Would it be things like going out more, not watching the pennies quite so much? But my overall guess is that we all might worry less, and we all might want to worry less. Because at the end of the day, what does worry give us? What does worry give us? Doesn't give us anything, does it? It's a waste of energy, and it dominates. It can take over. And of course, worry can be a pathway to mental health disorders, particularly anxiety. So focusing in a little bit more now on aortic dissection, one of the things that struck me about this condition, and I'm going to phrase it as is and as cognitive dissonance. And I thought it might be just quite useful to go into that term. Does everybody know what a cognitive dissonance is? I apologize if that's making people suck eggs. But then as I was thinking about saying that earlier, I thought the phrase teaching someone to suck eggs has cognitive dissonance in it itself. In that, first of all, cognitively, I know I wouldn't suck eggs. I don't suck eggs. And yet the dissonance is that I use the term. Yes? So an example then of cognitive dissonance might be, I want to be healthier, but my diet is poor and I put on weight. So the cognition is knowing I should and want to be healthier. The dissonance comes from, but my diet is poor and I put on weight and maybe I don't actually do anything about it. So just some things now about cognition. Cognition essentially meaning of the mind. So some of the many different cognitive processes include thinking, knowing, remembering, judging, problem solving. And these are high-level brain functions that encompass language, imagination, perception, and planning. I think we can all probably understand that. And then the term dissonance, perhaps we understand best around music, particularly around harmony. I think we can probably agree that harmony would be an opposite of dissonance. And we all know that sound, that we might find it used very creatively in music and some classical composers do that, don't they? And rock musicians, whatever, creating dissonant chords. So how does cognitive dissonance apply to us aortic dissectioners? So the cognitive bit I see as the idea that I've come through this, I've battled, I've been perhaps through surgery, I've been scared to death that I've lost my life, but I'm surely demonstrating that I want to live, that I have life libido, and I mean libido there in its widest term. So motivation for life, desire for life. That's cognitive, isn't it? I've done it. The dissonance comes in where I've become anxious or defensive. I may have withdrawn somewhat from life. And particularly, I don't really feel safe anymore, or so safe anymore. I've lost trust in my body. I've lost trust in myself, and that my body won't let me down. So let's just spend a moment with that. It's such a paradox. And in a way, paradoxes are fascinating and beautiful in their own way, because it shows us as human beings how contradictory we can be. Because the bottom line is, what's the point in doing all the battling, which is what? To live, to stay alive, if then we are going to be afraid of being alive, of being here? It's almost a perfect paradoxical contradiction. It doesn't add up, because you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. So this is the cognitive dissonance. You are doing all of this work cognitively, but then having a shrunken life experience. Okay, so what's going on here then? So mostly with this condition, we are creating anxiety. And I've said before in sessions and things here that nearly all anxiety is anticipatory. So we particularly have it around scan anxiety, don't we? And that's anticipatory. You know, what may happen, and it hasn't yet happened. You know, fear of flying is basically an anticipatory anxiety, which is not to say it can't be very powerful and very profound, but it is about things that are the mind is anticipating down the road and creating the fear. So we're actually fearing this condition being alive now because we are fearing what might happen in the future. Now I'm going to sort of drop down another level, and I'm going to talk about this in relation to fear of death. And it is extraordinary, really, how death remains such a very taboo subject that, you know, should I even bring it up, because I might frighten people? But I believe that we need to, because it's so fundamental to so many things, and certainly is in therapeutic work. And yet it is very taboo, even though it's around us all day in shootings, in wars. And we might obviously ask ourselves, why are crime thrillers or dramas where there's always death, they pivot around death, so popular, so compulsive? Because they allow us to explore death, perhaps in a way that we have control over. And it helps us to kind of massage some of our internal fears about death by proxy. Death is the primary driver in all human behavior. It's animal, it's instinctual. If you have your pet, your dog, your cat, knows that it takes actions for itself not to die. The cat runs away from the dog that's chasing it or claws it. My dog doesn't jump off the terrace for a laugh because it's one floor up. He knows. He's never even tried to do it to see what happens. He knows. So in aortic dissection, we have come close to death, haven't we? Let's be honest, that's what we've done. We may have seen it very up close, like I've done. You know, I was right there on the edge in the ambulance, and that creates trauma. Trauma is threat. It's a threat to the organism. It's a threat to stability. And again, stability is a mechanism to cope with being alive. Generally assumed, isn't it, that part of good mental health, a word that would be used and would be useful to use, would be stable, stability. Oh yes, he or she is feeling more stable than they were, as we again use it in physical health. But let's also not forget that we are we may think of ourselves as very sophisticated, developed creatures, but we are animal. And it is instinctual in us to want to stay alive. And actually, in the unconscious, it is the primary driver in all we do. And one of the paradoxes here as well is if I were going to ask you, are you never going to die then? I assume you would say, no, I am. Because if you said you weren't, your mental health would be very questionable. But it's amazing as well the extent we go to avoid thinking about it, to avoid actually confronting it as a reality that is completely revolving around this condition. So what can possibly happen with us as aortic dissection survivors is that we know we are mortal, basically, but the experience has made us into a heightened state of fearing it. I'm just going to say that again. So what has possibly happened with our mental health with this condition, or can happen, is that we know instinctually that we are mortal, but we are in a heightened state of fearing it, fearing our mortality. And this is where this can specifically lead to a mental health imbalance. So thinking about Mental Health Awareness Month, this can specifically lead to a mental health imbalance because the increased fear can create abnormalities in our behavior, such as anxiety, sleep issues, depression, withdrawal in some kind of search of safety. Right, so solutions. Are there solutions? Well, I think there are, but in their own way, they're quite abstract. I would say there are two principal solutions. I call them the double A's. And they are awareness, which is what part of that is what I'm talking about now. Awareness, 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 and acceptance. Acceptance and acceptance. So first of all, this awareness that I'm talking about, bringing the fears out into the open, looking at the reality of this, looking it in the eye, not being afraid to confront it, creates a pathway to acceptance. And then we have a tool to see our behaviors. So we can kind of go, oh, this is what I'm doing. This is, this is what my behaviors are. This is how I act out. And in so doing, you become less attached to the symptom. So, for example, if you recognize you are retreating and you begin to see that as a specific symptom, you can then start to do something about it. It doesn't own you in the same way because you are developing the awareness and you are developing the acceptance. That's what I'm doing, rather than maybe head down, just acting out, just retreating, just being defensive. And just as importantly here, as a way of kind of coming to a conclusion, acceptance is liberating. Acceptance liberates you because there is ease and contentment in acceptance. There is a peace that can be very healing and beneficial for the body. In acceptance of everything, we become less tense. It's better for our blood pressure, and we have just more ease. And isn't that something that many of us would like with this condition? To just feel more ease, and that feeling that some of that ease has gone away. So I hope that was helpful. Um, and I have Joshua here with me who may fill me in if there've been any comments.
We have a
So I've been,
quiet chat today, but I would like to point out the anxiety portion that you were bringing up.
mm,
Right. One of the things that I've noticed is that creative people that have anxiety tend to feed their anxiety far more than non-creative people. They find wild ways of adding fuel to that fire. Whereas non-creatives, they just kind of stick to the same script. This is happening to me. I can't believe this is happening to me. And they just kind of drum that anxiety to death. Whereas creative people are like, what if this? What if that? What if this? What if that? And it's like, you guys are, when you called it a waste of energy, I've often said there are a few things that your emotional state can do, right? When you're happy, you can't get happier. But when you're anxious, you can easily get more anxious. You can fuel anger, you can fuel fear. But the upside of these things is there's no way to
yeah.
push further. Yeah. So it's very interesting to note if you are in the dumps, be aware that you're in the dumps. Notice that you're in the dumps. Yeah. And don't be
So
creative about it.
would you consider yourself a great, you are a creative person?
I don't think that
Well,
I am. I think that I'm good at um, aesthetic, right? I'm a minimalist at best, right? So one of the things
mhm,
that when you look at the study of art and you see where the classical paintings were beautiful, wonderful, and then we went into the future and we have like 6 blocks with a line going through the middle of it, and you're like, this is modern art. I prefer I prefer very much the idea that art is stagnant, and what ends up
mhm,
happening is no matter how good it looks, people are going to get bored of it and they're going to want something new. And so I
mm,
really do push back on creative, and I tell people, get yourself an artist, get yourself somebody who does this with absolute ease, because for me to do anything creative is like moving mountains, because I resist it. I'm like, people aren't, they're going to like it now, they're not going to like it in 5 minutes. They're going to like it for 5 minutes, they're not going to like it in 2 weeks. And that's just how I've
mm,
always felt about art. And
yeah,
so it might be a self-fulfilling prophecy of me going, no, we're gonna go Spartan with our
yeah.
design. We're gonna get things straight to the meat of the content. We're not going to do anything, you know, bombastic.
So if you wanted me to comment on the kind of comparison you made, it's obviously
Sure.
very difficult to. I mean, I've obviously what I've been talking about here is kind of has to be general about
Mm-hmm.
across the board. Um, and everybody's different, aren't they? And if someone is talking to me, I would obviously go into perhaps their character with them in depth. I would maybe understand the degrees to which they are very sensitive people or not sensitive. Um, I don't dispute the idea with you that, imagination, which creative people might have, can be a big driver of anxiety because, if you're good at dreaming up stories and plots, you might be able to dream up stories for yourself of what may happen. Yes. But
Mm-hmm.
again, it doesn't take away from the fact that some of the basic tools and things for controlling this, for recognizing it's happening, remain true for everybody.
Yeah. Like when
As
you.
just maybe a very creative person who has a high level of anxiety
Mm-hmm.
may have to work harder at it, or may have to, and be a harder job for them, or maybe, if it gets very, very extreme, they maybe need some help with medication.
Mm-hmm. It's it's interesting because you see all of the rock stars that end up going off the deep end. Same thing with people in
Mm.
Hollywood; they go off the deep end. These high creatives, if it's not if it's not super comfortable, if it's not super easy, they spin out of control.
Hmm.
And I've often said, that's part of the life that they pick up, right? But at the same time, again, if you can fuel despair, anxiety, fear, if you can fuel depression with constant creative fuel, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare, and
Yeah.
it takes, you know, we're in Mental Health Awareness Month. Some, you know, men, I'll say it, you know, straight out loud. Men do not seek therapy, and they should. They should get a third party to take a look at what's going in from the outside. It's an important thing. When we had Karen's therapist on, she was like, you know, every 3 to 6 months, just get a checkup, make sure everything is okay. You never
Mm,
know, you
mm.
never know, and how quickly cognitive dissonance will have us hiding things from ourselves. Right? We'll
Yeah,
tuck
and
it away.
I mean, you know, we're prepared to invest in the gym, aren't we, and
Hmm.
our bodies and things. I call it, you know, the emotional gymnasium. Why, why wouldn't we invest in our mental health? It's just again, it's that barrier, isn't it? Which I have to say, I my what I've seen is it exists much less in the US, where many people are much more comfortable seeking therapy than they are in Europe. But there is often that stigma, particularly in men, that which is absolutely vital to break down, that somehow it makes you weak, that you know you're ill or something. You know, you're not ill. Just you know, and what does ill mean anyway? But you know, it's often seen as a thing that men shouldn't do. Plus, there's all the conditioning about men being taught not to show feelings, and you know, big boys don't cry, and all that kind of stuff. Those dreadful phrases like "man up," which are so destructive. So yeah,
Yeah, I think it's a touch point. Cognitive dissonance. Yeah, men need to pay a little bit more attention. It's a healthier
mm.
thing having a good conversation about where your headspace is.
Yes,
Productive conversation, ideally, right? But I don't know. I don't know. The American philosophy of spreading away from your family. That's another weird one, right? So across the globe, you still have multi generational families living in the same house, and
particularly here in Spain. Yes,
yeah,
yeah.
and so we look at it differently here in America. Like we send our kids off to college or university, and we have zero expectation on them coming home. Right? We want them to
Mm.
go to the big city, get the education, get the connections, you know, make or break it in the big cities. And you know, very often you're going to college to make a business connection. That business connection can take you anywhere. And then obviously when the internet hit, we were going everywhere. But we spread out in America. We do not consolidate by any means. And I think that that's going to be a big change coming up. I think a lot of Americans are going to start being more used to their children being home in their mid 20s.
And do you think that's been partly driven by economic necessity?
Uh, some of it's economic necessity, for
Because that
sure.
has also happened again in Spain. That as the
Yeah.
economy got more difficult,
Hmm.
um, you know, people have gone back into living in the home, partly because they can't afford houses.
Yeah, that's the thing. I hear a lot of weirdness in our northern neighbors, Canada, where the average home price is in the several hundreds of thousands of dollars, close to a million, and
Hmm.
you wonder how they got that way. You know, unsure. But I also don't know if they share the same sending their kids off to college and not coming back. I have a buddy, and he's the runt of the litter at 6'4". But he became an engineer, so he left for California to go build things, and then he chased his wonderful wife across the country to North Carolina, where he builds nuclear things. But you know, as a Canadian, he left, and the rest of his family stayed up there, and so he's the anecdotal, I wanted to spread my wings and fly kind of guy. When I ask him about like life up in Canada, he's like, "Oh, it's just massively different." He's like, "It all looks the same and it all sounds close to the same, but it is wildly different. The cultures, even just that close, are very different."
Mm.
And then
I've
when we
seen that.
have immigrants
Mm.
here, they do that. They do the multifamily in the household, right? And that again, for
Mhm.
1 to 2 generations, that consolidation of wealth, right? And how much of that plays into anxiety when you have your family close by.
So that's where I was going to come in
Yeah.
actually. Are you sort of predicating that you think that that mental health would be better if people did stay in the kind of new family unit more?
It's a question, right? It's a question.
Mm.
I don't know. I come from a military family, right? So we moved constantly. Like I come from a rootless, like it's rootless. It's to the point now where the concept of home is alien to me. It doesn't matter to me where I sleep. It doesn't matter to me where I live, where I work.
Mm.
I consider myself American more than I consider myself anything else. And
Yes.
it's because I've been, just kind of uprooted over and over again. And
But do you
so,
think that again would have there are certain symptoms in the way you behave which are reflections of that?
well, I'm not one that
I mean,
suffers from
because in a way,
anxiety
just
for
by
sure.
saying to me that you don't feel rooted is
Yeah.
almost like the other side of that is you're kind of almost hinting that you would like to feel rooted.
Oh no, I definitely see the benefits. Like for example, I've got buddies who played ball with the same team for years, and when you play ball with the same team for years, you just kind of get good at things, right? But one of the
Mm.
experiences of college is you get to leave your little bubble of safety and go and explore, and you find out that other people play ball a different way, sometimes smarter, sometimes harder, sometimes
Mm.
faster, and you get lulled into that false sense of security because you're like, well, this is the way it always was. And I've never had a sense of security of this is the way it always was. I was always testing and pushing. And one of the other things about cognitive dissonance is that what's that term that people have where they don't feel like they belong in their job?
Oh, imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome, right?
Mm.
This is a, to me, these two things are the same, right? Like you're doing a job and you're accomplished at your job, and for whatever reason you don't feel like you deserve that job, or you're faking it till you make it in this job. And that's more
Mm.
cognitive dissonance. This is more people just believing that they don't deserve the things that they've done, right? And so one of the things that you have, as we're going to go with a rootless son of a soldier, is that you're constantly making new friends, and you get good at meeting people and asking questions and having wildly different conversations. You don't get used to small talk. You just don't get used to it because you're always having bigger conversations because you're the new guy.
Mm.
All right.
Okay.
And
Hmm.
so the only thing that I would take in there from being rooted in a multifamily household or what have you would be that you have people around you. But my question is are those pathways, or are those gates, right? Because
Yeah.
you never know. Sometimes you have this
Yes.
massive family that's telling you how to live your life versus, sure, go figure out how the internet works. Let me know how that happens.
But doesn't that come back to my point about these beautiful paradoxes,
Sure.
in that they can be both, and we just also never know.
Yeah, yeah. I
I mean,
mean, I wouldn't change my
you're
childhood.
right that you can have that sort of family that's always lived in a small town somewhere, and everybody knows what everybody else is doing, and this is the way we've always done it.
Hmm.
And you go into the family business, and maybe you don't grow very much, and that
Yeah,
happens a lot in this culture as well, where people go into the family business. It's passed down,
yeah,
the family houses and so
yeah.
on.
Generational wealth.
Mm.
That's how it gets created. I have a client, and I just learned that he was the first person in 3 or 4 generations to leave New Jersey. Right, and you're just like, wow.
Of
Like,
his family.
the whole
Yeah.
family, extended family, the whole family. He's the first one to seek out
Mm.
something outside of New Jersey and of Irish descent. So like they showed up
Mm.
and they became policemen and firemen, and that's what the
Yeah.
Irish did. They run to danger. They're like that.
Well, you also wonder whether perhaps, if you're exploring that, the trauma of maybe having to leave Ireland in the first place,
Right?
maybe initially made that family want to become really rooted, and we
Yeah.
must make a new life. We must settle.
Yeah.
Because I've had that, that same diaspora happen in my Irish family too. Yeah. And
Yeah.
how it's played out with with the aunts who moved to America, and those that moved to Britain.
Mm. Right. And that becomes the question, right? Is multifamily staying in the same place healthier or not? That's a weird one.
Mm.
I don't know personally. I don't know. My family is full of weird, crazy people, and I can't imagine them being in the same. Like me and my brother are like night and day. we're great for 2 to 3 days, and then after that it's war. It's all out psychological warfare. And you never know whether you're on offense or defense.
It's interesting though how common that is amongst siblings and amongst families, that there'll be that honeymoon period of coming back together again for 1 or 2, 3 days, and then it's back to all the other stuff.
And then it's war.
Yeah,
Yeah, then it's war.
yeah. Yes.
So I don't know,
Okay.
but well, like just to you know, if there could be a red flag, or if there could be a kind of a warning sign, if you're experiencing anxiety and you believe yourself to be an artist or artistic or have flights of fancy, be aware that you are your own worst enemy.
Yes, that can be true. But also be aware of what you need to be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that when you, that question of like, what, you know, why am I doing this? Is this doing me any good? That thing about worry. We can only take a step back from worry and take a breath and stop that rumination and just sort of go, hold on a minute, this is, you know, achieving nothing. That thing of waking at 3 in the morning, you can't do anything about it till the morning. You know, and if you need to break the cycle of lying in there in bed, get up. Yes, get up. Come back to bed in half an hour, whatever. But break the cycle, break the rumination. So it is kind of, just to say, you know, like, you know, if mental health is a kind of nutrition, we need to be paying, you know, little bits of attention to it all the time. In the same way, you'll hear people talk about, well, that food suits me, or you know, I can't have lactose or whatever, because they've observed they have a reaction in their body. We need to become more sophisticated about observing reactions in our behavior, which we're much less good at, I would argue.
Yeah.
We just blunder on doing the same things.
Do you do any work with people that have the wearable technologies for like measuring sleep, and ask them how they're sleeping?
Actually, I don't. No,
No?
I don't.
I would love to find out, especially if we could get a poll going in the community, just to see, like, do people have good sleeping habits? Are they getting good sleep? How much of the anxiety is because they're watching TV in bed, you know?
Yes. Well, I am, you know, I'm aware of, through a couple of friends who have sort of chronic insomnia, that they have these, it's the Apple Watches, isn't it? Sorry, I'm a bit old-fashioned. And that can give them a report on their kind of sleep.
Oh, they all have it. Yeah, they all have it. I got one for Christmas not too long, maybe, I guess, pre-COVID, so who knows, 7 years ago, what have you. And I wore it for about a week. Right? I don't like anything on me when I'm working. I don't like rings. I don't like, my ex-wife hated that. I don't like watches. I don't like, you know, things are banging around my keyboard when I'm trying to type. And so I wore it to sleep, and I saw that, you know, I was confirmed in my regular belief that I go to bed at 3 o'clock. I get about 6 hours of sleep. It's very good, deep sleep. And then I wake up. I was like, see, it's like really clockwork. Joshua. It's like clockwork. Yeah. Don't fight it.
Yeah. If it's not. And you're okay with 6 hours? Some people would feel they need more.
The thing is that it's been this way my whole life. That's the thing, right? So when I went and talked to a sleep therapist, I was like, you know, I am not a good person at 8 o'clock in the morning. And when I say that, I mean my mental capacity is in the trenches. I already have a bit of a short temper, and so I keep that thing right closed. And in the morning, that can come out the wrong way quickly and easily with, you know, no problems. So when your manager comes walking up to you...
I will remember that moving forward.
Yeah. When your manager comes up and asks you why you're late to work again, you're doing your best not to backhand that guy. And you're just like, I told you, I don't come to work until 10. Right? And then you adjust your hours, and then everybody's happy because you're showing up and you're in your best everything, and you work your way through everything.
And from your own, you know, just very broadly, your own mental health, some people you see would have a lot of anxiety about that, wouldn't they? Because they'd have guilt, because they'd fear the telling off, they'd fear the admonishment of the boss. And you haven't ever gone through a stage where you thought, I really need to tackle this waking up in the morning.
That's how I ended up with the sleep therapist. I wanted to
Oh,
see if there
so
was a
tell us a bit about that.
well, I wanted to see if there was a thing there, if I was missing something.
Mm,
So I sat with the guy. We talked about it. You know, he asked me about my early childhood, the whole nine, and I didn't have a traumatic childhood by any stretch. It was just the uprooting of military. It's whatever. But like he was just like, some people just sleep late. They're just late people, right? And he goes, so at the end of the day, there are a few things that you want to pay attention to. The first thing is you don't want to do anything in your bedroom except for the bedroom activities. He's like, so if you're watching TV or if you're playing video games or if you're doing something in your room, don't. Just don't do it. Don't associate your bedroom with anything other than rest. And then he said, the ritual is big, right? So wash your face, brush your teeth, you brush your hair, get into your night clothes, get into bed. He's like, that ritual is the kind of thing that tells your brain, we're going to go lay down, we're going to go get rest, we're closing out our day, the whole nine. And all of his advice made good sense, but it didn't matter. Didn't matter when I started that ritual. I was gonna lay there for 3 hours at midnight until 3 o'clock came down and finally get tired enough to go to sleep.
yes. So would he have advised not even reading a book in bed then?
Yeah, he said don't even read. He's like, you can read in your living room, you can start to yawn and you can start to feel like you're ready and then do that. He's like, this is a thing, right? And this is way before like cell phones and YouTube and kids are
Sure.
throwing the blankets over their head watching movies all night long. But I mean, in every country I've ever lived in, I've seen the clock strike 3 o'clock in the morning before I start falling asleep.
And you remember that from when you were a child?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Which is quite unusual in a child, isn't it?
I don't think so. I feel like we all
No?
have memories. I think.
No, I don't mean that we don't have memory. Not having memories isn't unusual. I mean a child not falling asleep till 3.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
I
Like
think
I
it,
have
I
I
think
have
it is.
friends that can lay down and fall asleep like immediately,
Mm,
and I'm like, what a gift! What a gift! that's
yes.
that's got to be like the best blessing in the world. But I don't stress about my sleep because once I've made the decision, I was like, I'm up till 3. I don't fight it anymore.
Mm.
That was really a thing.
So you've gone to acceptance there, haven't you? As I was talking about earlier.
Well, the resistance was, having to be told to be someplace at a certain time. There's a
Mm.
thing there. So now there's the responsibility, right? And that responsibility brings on dread, right? Like I'm never
Yes,
gonna make
yes, it
it,
does. Yeah.
This is the same thing with like early
That's
flights.
very aware of you to see that, the dread, that is dread sitting underneath that.
Well, there's
Because
dread
dread
and
again is fear of being, punished or told off
sure,
or
sure. I
mm,
mean, in many ways, I was lucky enough to be able to have the career that I have, right? Like building networks, the high technology work, all of that such a young age that it was brazen of me to even be the way I was, where I would be like, listen, man, you can fire me. It's fine. I'll get another job. Like, that was my attitude. I was like, I'll just get another job. It'll probably be easier than this. Like, very, very cowboy about things. Just nonchalantly, like, yeah, I'm late. I told you not to put me on the day shift.
yeah, yes. Okay. Well, let's close it up then, shall we?
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Cognitive
Um,
dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance, folks. And to repeat, yes, Joshua, please like us
Oh yes,
and
yes.
share us. Yes. And let me just see if I can put up a final thought about cognitive dissonance.
All right. While you work
Um,
on that, I'm just gonna share this. Don't
okay.
sweat the petty things that won't pet the sweaty things.
Oh, that's very nice. Yeah. Okay. Well, no, that's beaten. We'll end it there. Okay. Thank you very much to everybody.